Hi, so good afternoon. We're here today. My name is Caitlin Young, and I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs with ANRF. And today we want to talk about a really exciting funding mechanism that we have for our early career researchers interested in PSA. And who better to help us talk about this than one of our scholars, Bahram Razani, as well as Soumya Chakravarty from Johnson & Johnson, who supports this funding mechanism specifically for PSA research. So we just really want to talk about so Bahram, for you first, Dr. Razani, what your research was about and kind of how ANRF's this funding mechanism has helped advance your research.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Caitlin. My research broadly, I'm a dermatologist actually by training, and so my research was really interested in cutaneous immunology, and we developed a mouse model where we were looking at a particular protein that's associated genetically with both psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, and developed a mouse model where we essentially deleted that gene in skin, and that mouse model developed psoriatic arthritis-like symptoms. And so based on this model, I became more interested in the pathogenesis of psoriatic arthritis, and I came to find this grant mechanism.
That's fantastic. And Dr. Chakravarty, do you want to give a little bit of background around kind of what your personal background is, as well as your role with Johnson & Johnson, and why you support this particular grant mechanism?
Yeah, no, for sure, Caitlin, and thank you for this opportunity. This is, a wonderful platform to have such a conversation. So I'm a rheumatologist by training, and I've been with Johnson & Johnson for a little over 8.5 years now, and my role is that of leading rheumatology medical affairs for the Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine Organization, so the U.S. organization within J&J. And our goal, and really the impetus, I think, for supporting the ANRF with a dedicated PsA research fellowship is to really, I think, build on some of the things that Bahram was talking about in terms of building a pipeline, right, of researchers that are interested in psoriatic disease, I'll say more broadly, be it psoriatic arthritis in particular or the spectrum of psoriatic disease. And by doing so, really be able to identify potential opportunities in the future for better understanding of the immunopathophysiology of psoriatic disease, potential therapeutic targets for the future, and so on, right? And this is, I think, one of many mechanisms, but an important one by which we as Johnson & Johnson can help support advancing the science around psoriatic disease.
That's fantastic. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, where I will ask maybe both of you to weigh in on this. But so, Soumya, how did you envision this particular research, PsA research being funded by this grant in advancing treatments? And then I'll pass that maybe to you, Bahram, to talk a little bit more about some of the key findings you found in your research with the support of this grant mechanism.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin, for the question. So I think the goal for us is to be able to support research whereby there are new findings potentially, right, that uncover parts of the mechanism of disease, parts of the immune pathophysiology of psoriatic disease that we may not be aware of or need to be further elucidated. And in doing so, is there then translatability? Right. And so therefore, is there an opportunity with the findings from the research to be able to have some potential, impact in the clinic down the line? And we may not know that initially, of course, but I think there's always that potential, and maybe keeping that frame of mind that the work that is being done with the research, hopefully supported by the grant, could potentially have some, translatability to the clinic, that classic sort of bench to bedside paradigm, and, allow us, as I said before, not only to build upon the talent and the pipeline of research in psoriatic disease, but then also that translatability into potential therapies for the future.
Fantastic. And Bahram? Looks like we're a little bit on pause.
Oh, sorry, my internet may be a little bit.
No, no worries at all.
Can you guys hear me?
Edit this part out. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, we're back. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. So as I mentioned, we've been interested. I'm a basic scientist. I work on preclinical mouse models. And so in terms of the findings, we've been very interested in this protein A20 or TNF-AIP3, which has a lot of genetic associations with both psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. And we've also been very interested in this question between the immunological links between cutaneous psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, and really what's their relationship. And we know that typically speaking, individuals had cutaneous psoriasis for several years before psoriatic arthritis. So we've taken advantage of genetic models where we can delete A20 just in keratinocytes, and then these mice also develop psoriatic arthritis-like disease. And so that's really allowed us to parse what the relationship is between cutaneous immune dysregulation and essentially PsA-like enthesitis and joint disease. And so with the help of the ANRF, they generate new hypotheses about pathways which A20 might be regulating. And that's led us to two distinct pathways that we've now been able to, again, dissect using genetic models and understand their role in mediating the skin to joint connection. And so the particular pathway that we've really honed in on is MyD88, which is a really important innate immune signaling mediator. And so we think that A20 is really regulating and restricting MyD88 in keratinocytes to prevent the arthritis. And so now we have even more refined mouse models with more fine dissection of the pathogenesis to be making even the sort of N+1 type of findings, which we're just starting now. So I think it's, it takes all kinds of research, preclinical research and human research to really get at the answer of these complex types of inflammatory diseases. And I think, we're working on the preclinical end and chewing on this side. And there's many talented researchers kind of coming from the human side. So hopefully together we can get further along.
That's fantastic. So thank you both. I think that's kind of leads me to my next question, and you touched on it a little bit. Is kind of where do you see kind of and I pose this to both of you, but where do you envision kind of the future with this grant funding? Where do you envision or hope that it advances to, treatment options and a better understanding of the disease, as well as mechanisms that we can utilize and see kind of branch out? I think, Soumya, you really talked about that as well, is kind of how do we advance the research in this area and understanding in this area moving forward, utilizing these findings supported by this grant funding.
I'll defer to Bahram first.
Okay, great.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure, absolutely. So the question is sort of how are we going to use these findings to get to the next step in the disease? Yeah. What are we envisioning with this? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one of the big questions in this area are the IL-23, IL-17 TNF inhibitors work so effectively for cutaneous psoriasis, and even though they're the most effective things for psoriatic arthritis, they're not really nearly as effective as our capacity to treat PsA. And so I think I think mouse models are particularly helpful in this realm, where we can really control when we're using things like IL-23, IL-17, and TNF inhibitors in mice, and understand what pathways are left that are activated that might be causing tissue pathology. And so our hope is to really use this preclinical model in a way that patients might be developing the tempo of disease and treatment to understand what types of pathways may still be active.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with Bahram, and I think just to maybe add to that, this is really an opportunity to, again, with a funding mechanism like this dedicated PsA fellowship grant, to set the stage for the kind of work that can be done with that potential translatability, such that when the opportunity comes to build on that work with, let's say, the next tranche of funding from other grant mechanisms that are in play, that you can then continue to advance the science. And of course, there's always going to be probably more questions than answers that are generated, but it's through that process of more questions than answers being generated that you can build on the work, such that, again, you're driving towards that ultimate target of, is what I'm finding of potential clinical relevance, could there be an opportunity here to translate that into the treatment paradigm for psoriatic disease, for example, in the future?
Yeah. So, Bahram, this is really specific to you and your experience, but how has the ANRF grant impacted your career and your research career, and what would you say to others that are looking to apply for funding, especially to this particular PsA fellowship?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the ANRF funding has drawn me into the PsA world much more, and that's been for a couple of reasons. I've just learned more about it, but also the ANRF grant mechanism is really, really wonderful because it's not just funding. Also, there's yearly conferences where I've really met not just other individuals who've gotten awards from the ANRF, but also the scientific advisory board has a number of really successful and important people in the PsA world that it's been really helpful to meet. And so meeting those people and talking to them just makes for a much more interesting and collegial process to learn more about PsA and move in new directions that are particularly relevant to the entire field. So I think that's really been quite a important thing for me, is to meet some of the really kind of key opinion leaders in the scientific community surrounding PsA. Which has really opened up this world much more to me and just made me a lot more interested in studying it.
That's great. So did you have any particular challenges that you were not expecting where this grant has helped you in terms of overcoming them or addressing some of those challenges through the way? I mean, I think maybe I heard a few of them just in terms of tying into a community of key thought leaders as well as experts in the field that you could collaborate with. But were there other particular challenges where this grant funding was particularly helpful in addressing?
Yeah, I think, actually, I remember this conversation at the ANRF conference, and one of the individuals on the scientific advisory board that I was chatting with, he mentioned it's really hard to think broadly if you're very stressed about money. I think that's just very true. And I think if you're really stressed about getting from this grant to that grant, or this type of thing, you just can't think broadly and can't think creatively. And so that's been certainly helpful. It's reduced the pressure, the funding pressure, and that's very important. And also, I think, especially during this early career stage, these types of awards are really signals to other people who have resources that you are a person who's making contributions. And I think all of these signals are really helpful on a career level because it opens up more funding and more opportunities. And these are all big challenges at an early stage.
Yeah. And so Soumya, kind of in tandem with this. In what ways do you believe that the collaboration between researchers, funders, and institutions can accelerate breakthroughs in PsA research?
Oh, I think the possibilities are limitless. So I really appreciate the question, because I do think that maybe there's sometimes a tendency to silo ourselves, right? And not really have line of sight visibility into what potential collaborators or potential partners are up to. And I think it's kind of building off of Bahram's comment that through these kinds of mechanisms, right, like this, PsA Research Fellowship Grant, that you have an opportunity to be better potentially integrated, right, into, the PsA world, for example, right? You have an opportunity to now co-ideate, collaborate, and imagine together, right, with new scientific partners. And I think this is the whole point of bringing together the foundation, other academic partners, industry, et cetera, so that it's really at the end of the day a very collaborative process where you're able to co-ideate and imagine together for the betterment of patients and providers. At the end of the day, that's what we're all in this line of work for, so to speak, which we all have a shared purpose and a common goal, right, to be able to better health for humanity. And so therefore, by being able to, by bringing together all these different partners, I think you go a long way in achieving that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I'll pose this question to both of you, and we touched on it a little bit, but do you have any advice or other thoughts to potential applicants or people kind of questioning if this is the right fit for their research?
I'll start off. Kaylin. I think psoriatic arthritis. I guess one I would say is there are many different pathways to psoriatic arthritis, and there's a lot of immune dysregulation that can lead to it. And so, thinking broadly about how your research can impact psoriatic disease and psoriatic arthritis specifically, and also especially as a younger person, I think just getting a lot of feedback from more senior and more experienced people in terms of grantsmanship to write a really great grant that's quite focused in this area is really helpful. And there's lots of mentors that I've knocked on their doors to really make sure that the specific aims page and so forth all are kind of fleshed out and work together.
That's great. Soumya, do you have any advice for potential applicants or thoughts about the grant mechanism itself that may be helpful for those that are thinking about where to apply for funding?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think it's best to hear it from a successful applicant like Bahram. But to build on that, I think I agree that when we think about a spectrum of disease like psoriatic disease, the basic point is similar to what Bahram mentioned, right? That PsA research can kind of come in many different forms, and so it's perhaps best that if there is interest in this PsA fellowship grant, that and you think the work that you're doing is in that related spondyloarthritis or psoriatic disease spectrum space, to maybe seek some counsel, some input, right? I think that's why having a very engaged and robust scientific advisory board that I know we have and that you have as ANRF is really that opportunity, that sounding board, right? To be able to reach out and maybe get some initial input, impressions as to whether this could be a good fit, right, as part of the grant application for the PSA Research Fellowship. So I do think doing a little bit of that kind of due diligence up front could then help provide the necessary guidance and direction as to whether to go forth, right? And could this potentially be a good fit for the research fellowship in PSA, or perhaps not?
Well, thank you both for your time today and for sharing your experience and support of this PSA fellowship with ANRF. We appreciate it immensely. If there's anything else that you want to share, please feel free to chime in, but I do appreciate you sharing and helping us get the word about this opportunity.